Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carolyn if you're new here, and we are doing a good old June wrap up. We have a lot of books to talk about, so I'm not going to waste any time. We are just going to get started, and I think we should start with a highlight of my reading month, and that is the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemison. I don't even know where to start with these books. They've been on my TBR for such a long time, and can I just say I'm very proud of myself for finally reading them. I was just not ready to dedicate so much time to a huge series, and each of the books is big, and I knew that I would want to kind of read them in one back to back, so it just felt right and I was ready this month. But let's just mostly talk about the 5th season because I don't want to do any spoilers, obviously. Where do I start? So this series is set in a place called the Stillness, which is essentially Pangea that is in a very futuristic time. It is one huge continent that is constantly plagued with disaster. There are earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, and the people who live there are always on the edge of their seat waiting for the next season or disaster. That's what they're called. They're called seasons when, an ecological disaster strikes and everyone has to essentially wait it out, and these seasons could last years, decades, centuries. And essentially the world is constantly on the edge of destruction. So, another whole aspect to this book is the societal structure. It is oppressive, it is caste-like. There are people called the Stills, which are everyday humans. They can't do much, they just exist. There are people called Origines. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but these Origines are born with the ability to control the earth, right? They can quell earthquakes, but they can also make earthquakes happen. They could kind of control earth, right? They can make things. Avatar: The Last Airbender, that's what they can do. Okay, I don't know why I'm trying to make it so complicated. So, and then there are people, this sect called the Guardians, and they are people who are charged with controlling the Origins, because even though a continent that is constantly upended by disaster needs Origins to survive, they are also absolutely feared, detested. They are kind of the lowest place in society. People hate them, and for that reason Origins are kind of made to live in these very specific places. They are constantly being watched and controlled, and it is oppressive, absolutely oppressive. So I think what this book, specifically in the 5th season, obviously, because it's the first one, I am always on board with. I don't need all the answers. I'm okay with being a little bit confused. For example, like the Southern Reach Trilogy by Jeff Vandermeer, I had no idea what was going on, but also nobody else had any fucking clue what was going on. The characters didn't know what was going on. It was just a mess, right? But for me, those books worked so well because it was like new, right? Nobody knew what was going on because it was a very new situation they were all trying to figure out. So this is very different, right? Because the systems of oppression, the survival tactics, the functions that are going on in the world and all these different factions have been in place for centuries. And Jemison just throws you there in the middle of kind of the latest happenings and says, like, figure it out. So it was a little bit hard to, like, get my bearings at the beginning. Well, not at the beginning, throughout this whole book, really. I was like, what is going on? I was constantly not understanding, and there were points where I got frustrated. But then I just said, okay, I'm just going to trust Jemison to get me there, and she did. She gives us what we need to know, and it really is, a lot is put on the reader. We have to figure it out. She's not going to stop and explain things to us. There is shit happening in the stillness, and she doesn't have time to spell it out for us. So I appreciate that. I get that. So in this specific book, a season is just beginning. Another disaster is just beginning, and everyone in all these different factions is kind of settling into the knowledge that a season has begun and they need to prepare. So we follow a few different perspectives in this book, and we really are just, like I said, we are just learning the different factions at play. We are really learning the societal structure. We are following people who are Origins, so we are really learning from their perspective the way that the world is working, and we really see how they are so badly mistreated but also relied on to save everyone's ass. So what Jemison does in all of these books like I don't even have the words. What she does with naming, places, gender, race, identity, point of view, like unparalleled in its genius. I can't even explain to you. Actually, one thing that really, really annoyed me, and I'm sorry, is the language that, for example, people will say like, oh shit, and they'll be like, oh, rust, or oh, earth fire. That felt like a little bit on the nose for me, Jemison. We get it. But other than that, I can't really complain too much. I just thought it was fantastic. I think really these books are just such an achievement. When you read a huge trilogy like this, the fact that there are so many layers to these ideas, and she really is like condemning our current societal structures. There's obviously a lot of parallels to our modern world and of people being oppressed but also used and relied on. So she's making a lot of kind of political commentary and doing it really, really well, but also making such a fascinating story. And again, talking about these disasters and what kind of comes out in human nature when the world is on the edge of destruction. I just like was really blown away by this first book. It was fantastic. I can't even explain. The ideas in here are, I just think she's so smart. Like truly a genius. And then we have the next book, The Obelisk Gate. So this book, one of the mysteries in the 5th season, the first book, is that there are these like crystals that are floating in the sky and nobody really knows what they are, why they're there, how they got there, what they do. And it's just like this mystery in the 5th season that Jemison just doesn't have time in this one to get to. So that's what this book is. And again, the season is setting in. It's kind of picking up its pace, and there's ash in the air, and people can't breathe, and people are trying to find places to take cover and wait it out, and it could be centuries. So in this one, the descriptions of actual like physical places was really, really fascinating. I loved that. I think this one does feel like it got stuck in a little bit of like that middle book in a trilogy spot. It felt a little bit overlong, and we didn't get enough new information in this book, but it was still entertaining, and it was still so smart. And like she's building, she will get you there, like I said, so don't, like there's still so much to love about this book. But then you get to the last book in the series, The Stone Sky, and shit's hitting the fan. This one really feels like, you know, Avatar The Last Airbender meets The Road. A lot is happening. And this book really kind of ramped up the political and social commentary and the science of like the Earth, which was really present in the 5th season, kind of fell off in the Obelisk Gate, the Obelisk Gate, and then picked up again in The Stone Sky. So she brought it back to what I was really, really enjoying. I really loved to read about like what was physically happening in the Earth and how these people are surviving, and basically the will to survive that humans have, but also again making so much commentary, and she's so smart. I can't even explain. Like I love sci-fi. I didn't even know I liked fantasy, so something is happening to me. And again, the characters are these. I didn't even talk about the characters, but the characters are so real and so complicated, and you don't even know how you feel about them. And it's heartbreaking, it's painful to read, and I loved it. I think obviously my favorite was the 5th season. This one was like a 5-star. This one was like a 4. I was like, all right, let's get to like the next thing. But it's also like, you know, people are trying to just learn where they're going to survive and what they're going to do. So we can't really like fault it. It's just like a middle book in a trilogy, and it's just kind of quietly building that world, one thing on the next, and you're just kind of getting your bearings. And then this last book, like a 4.5, it ramped it up again. It was weird. It doesn't always make sense, but it does. I can't even explain it. And it's fantastic. So that is my Broken Earth trilogy experience. And then we have a book, let's just get it over with, because I know people are going to have opinions, and that is Open Water by Caleb Azumah Nelson. So, from some huge books to a very, very skinny book, this is about 2 Black British artists, a dancer and a photographer, and their kind of blossoming romance. like the will they, won't they kind of thing. But really this book is about police brutality and macroaggressions and the toll, the physical and mental toll that it is taking on our main character, and kind of the grief that he's experiencing and how that keeps him from fully entering into a relationship with somebody else because he's suffering himself. So, people love this book. Like, this, I'm sure, will be in a lot of people's top books of the year. People who I usually agree with on books love this. So let's just put that out there. I read this with Steph and Miriam, and we all had like a little bit of different opinions, but I think none of us loved it as much as we expected. So this book is so lyrical, so poetic, so flowery, and there are moments in time where I could get on board with that. Like, on occasion, those books can really be like stellar for me. Think like Beloved by Toni Morrison, Unearthed or Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, two of my like favorite books. But this, to me, this lyrical writing felt so forced. It did not feel natural to me. It felt like Caleb Azumah Nelson had like a few lines he knew he wanted to be in there, and he just like made them happen even if they didn't really flow. And I think, for example, the two books that I mentioned, Beloved and Unearthed or Briefly Gorgeous, the writing is so beautiful and poetic and almost like and what's the right word? You kind of lose yourself in the writing. But those two books also have such rich characters, and the characters are so fully developed, but for me, the characters in this felt like just two-dimensional. There wasn't much to them, especially the female love interest had like no personality at all. And so I'm sorry, I know people love this book. So if you're interested, or if this is a book that you absolutely love, ignore me and go find somebody who has a stellar review, because there are far more out there. And I think it is not in the norm to not love this. I didn't even rate it on Goodreads because I'm not gonna like fuck up somebody's rating just because it didn't work for me. But for me, this is like a 2.75. It was hard for me to get through, and it's a small book. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everyone. And then we have one that I am not ashamed of that I read. So if you guys know me, you know that my favorite thing of all time is The Borgias on Netflix. Love that show. I love anything set in like medieval Florence, Rome, the Pope, the Borgias, the Medicis. I live for that. Like, I live for that drama. And I will read like, you know, real books, you know, like Wolf Hall, for example, Lent by Savonarola, like historical fiction that really has a lot to say. But then sometimes we need like a raunchy historical fiction. And I was having a moment, and I just am not ashamed. So this is a historical fiction about the Borgias, but it is not historical in the same sense that the other books I mentioned. Okay, this is like a sexy, steamy Cesare sleeping around, and I am here for it, and I'm not sorry. But I think it also is fun when you do kind of consume so many of these different historical retellings. It is interesting to see how kind of another author takes it on. They are like the most infamous family, and this book takes a few different turns, so that's always fun to see. Even if I don't agree with it, it's always fun to see how another person takes it on. When they really are kind of larger-than-life historical characters, historical figures. But it was just fun, and I'm not embarrassed that I read it. I love this stuff, guys. It's like my guilty pleasure, and it brings me joy and comfort. And like, even if like the actual characters and the plot gets absolutely absurd, which this one did, I love feeling like I'm in 15th century Rome and Florence. I think it's just so fascinating. And I love that. Actually, call out of this book. It used like attempted rape multiple times as like a plot device and a plot advancer. And that's just like laziness, and I'm not here for that. But also, I was thoroughly entertained. And this is just like something that I will always love, and I will always kind of return to ridiculous historical fiction retellings like this. Okay, then we have another highlight of my read. Oh, I gave this like a 3-star. Did I say I gave this like a 3-star? It was absolutely fun, and I enjoyed myself. So, okay. Then we have Dear Senthuran. This is Akwaeke Emezi's memoir. If you watched my May wrap-up, then you know that I absolutely loved Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. I am obsessed. I think it's absolutely one of the best books I've ever read. So unique, so enamoring, so smart, and really just like nothing I've ever read before. And what this book really did is made me love freshwater even more, which I didn't know was possible. It really explores Emezi's, the complexities of their identity, and then if you didn't know, because I didn't know when I first read it, so it's not like, I don't know if everyone knows, freshwater is autofiction. A lot of Ada's experiences and identity are based on Emezi's own life. So it just made me appreciate freshwater even more, but also Emezi as a human, it made me appreciate them even more. It talks about so many different aspects of their life, from, you know, their writing, their art, talks about freshwater, talks about the death of Vivek Oje, talks about Pet, the last two I have not read yet, but it also talks about kind of different romantic relationships, and about, it talks about the Women's Prize and the transphobia of the Women's Prize. It talks about basically the canon and fuck the canon, and they're going to make their own. It talks about the publishing industry, and actually what I really appreciated about this book is, I'm sure a lot of people keep up with like the publishing industry, but as a reader, I feel like I'm not always privy to the bigger things that are in the works behind the scenes. And Emezi really like called it out, talking about working to get freshwater published, and then even all these people who were willing to share Emezi's story and were willing to profit off of it, but were not willing to pay them a livable wage. So really just so vulnerable, so honest, so cutting. I just think Emezi is basically a genius, and I will read anything they write. The Death of Vivek Oje is on my list next. I don't know what else to say. I love them. So this I gave like a 4.5 star. I just think, yeah. What else can I say? Okay. Then we have a book that I did a whole vlog about, and that is Hidden Valley Road by Robert Kolker. Sorry, I always do that. This is the nonfiction book about the Galvin family in the 1970s in the U.S., and this family has 12 children, and 2 are girls, 10 are boys, and throughout their lives, 6 out of the 12 children are diagnosed with schizophrenia. 6 of the boys are diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it is basically a story of their lives and their diagnosis and the family dynamics. I loved this book. This is a 5 out of 5 star. I think it's brilliant. Okay, sorry, the camera was overheating, so we had to take a little break. What was I talking about? I was talking about Elena Ferrante's My Brilliant Friend. This is, of course, the first book in the Neapolitan series. We are introduced to our 2 main characters, Elena and Lila, as children, how they become friends. We follow them into their girlhood, their adolescence, and I'm very, very excited to continue in the series. Basically, this book it's set in 1950s Naples in their very small community, and really you feel like Ferrante uses their very small community as like a microcosm to explore kind of the changing Italy and this new wave of modernity, and there's a lot of economic and social tensions in this book, and the girls are coming of age in this period where a lot of things are changing. They're very tuned in on money and flashiness and status, and I think what a lot of people talk about for this book is really the girls' relationship. It is a toxic one, and you could say, like, you know, they're just young girls, it's cattiness, but it's not just that. There are so many layers to it. And sometimes I do just feel like young girls and you want to give them a hug, but they really are representative of, you know, the old and the new, and there's a lot of tension because they place a lot of emphasis on their education, as they should, but for them, education is really a means to an end, and they want to be able to have this kind of like superiority over one another. For example, Lila is naturally gifted. She's really, really bright. And she kind of has this like too good for you attitude about everything. Whereas Elena has to work even harder to still receive less praise. And so she like admires Lila, but she resents her a little bit. But then, you know, when Lila's family says, okay, you're done getting your education, you'll come work at the family shop, Elena is still allowed to continue on in her education. That really causes, you know, a whole nother clash between the girls. I think what this book did really well is it explores really like sometimes the sadness and hurt and trauma of girlhood. A lot of things that are specific to time and place of this book, the setting, but then also things that are universal truths of feeling all of a sudden uncomfortable in your body and wanting male attention, but also feeling uncomfortable when you get it, and comparing yourself to your friends. And it's really like, it's endearing and heartbreaking, and I think a lot of people can relate to it. But more than that, I think the book has a lot of male violence. There's a lot of tension in this book, and the girls, it's kind of like normalized around them because it's what they're used to, but I think they are striving for something better. And the framing narrative of this book that is so briefly mentioned in like the first 2 pages is Elena as, you know, a grown woman, and Lila's son comes to her and says, my mom disappeared. And so Elena is recounting their beginning years of their friendship. So I hope that in the books to come, Lila and Elena's friendship will bring them both more like love and security and kind of care and comfort. I think they both really need that. This book leaves off on a cliffhanger. I just feel like the girls they feel so real, and you love them, and I feel like at the end of this book, you know them. We know them so well. I think the writing of this book is so incredible, and this did feel like a cozy book to me. You know, you guys, I love a book that has like a cast of characters on the first page. I love that. I'm a sucker for anything like that. I absolutely loved it. I cannot wait to continue. I gave this like a 4.5. I truly loved it. And my mom read all of these books last summer, and I was like making fun of her, like, what are those ugly covers? That looks like a horrible book. And I was mistaken. Then we have Unsettled Ground by Clare Fuller. Now we're getting into the books that I talked about in depth in my Women's Prize shortlist book, my shortlist video. So if you watch that video, you can like kind of click out here because I don't want to be too repetitive, but I still want to talk about them a little bit. Again, this is Unsettled Ground by Clare Fuller. We are following 51-year-old twins, Jeannie and Julius, and they live with their mother Dot in a small cottage, and they lived with her their whole life, and they live a very sequestered life. And at like the offset of this book, their mother very suddenly dies, and all of a sudden the twins are thrust into all these different problems that they've never had to work through before. They're thrust into poverty, and they're uncovering all of these secrets about their mother and unearthing all these secrets about their parents' past. And it's really like traumatic for them to have their whole lives kind of flipped over and have to kind of start anew. And this book is about poverty and how they are grappling with that and trying to maintain a sense of dignity and a sense of home and place. And there is this really awesome twin dynamic between Jeannie and Julius, and so much love there, and really like relying on each other more than any siblings I've read before. They really are relying on each other for survival and for almost like validation that they're important and that they matter, even if the world is kind of turning their backs on them. But there is also the tension that Julius is almost wanting to like strive out on his own and make a life for himself. He's never had the chance to do that before, and Jeannie really wants to like maintain what they have because so many things are changing, and she's not ready for her relationship with her brother to change. So you love them, you're angry at them, you want to like shake them and do something about it, but it's also like they're not there for us to judge them. And I just thought we really like got to know these characters really well, so no complaints. I gave it a 4-star. And then we have a weird one, which is No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. This is an internet novel. We are following our narrator who is sucked into the portal. She lives for the portal. She has gone viral, and now she's touring around, making different appearances. And the first half of this book is very like sparse moments on the internet and, you know, all these different things, and it feels like you're getting whiplash, you're inundated, and it feels very internet-y. And I think she does that really well to try to capture something that's larger than life in such a short book, and I think she does that. And it's sometimes witty, and it's uncomfortable, it's laugh out loud funny, it's like, oh my god, I feel seen in your pages. We have that naked and afraid moment. We have just so much going on. The book then splits and goes into a second half where something tragic happens in our narrator's family, and she's sucked out of the portal, and she has to kind of grapple with this tragedy. And it really is playing with what are the overlaps between your online life and your like real life, where are the lines blurred, but also what remains just superhuman. I really enjoyed it. I much preferred the first section. I said that in the other video. I think that's where Lockwood does her best work. The second half of the book is a little bit overdone, or just like they feel like not compatible, but they are in a sense. So I don't know how I feel about it. I just really enjoyed it. I think she's doing something new and exciting, and so I gave this one a 4-star. I enjoyed it. Yeah. Sorry, my camera just overheated, so I had to take a quick break. I was talking about how the One-Armed Sisters Peeps Her House by Cherie Jones, another book on the Women's Prize shortlist. In my video, I gave it a 4.5, but I have bumped it up to a 5. It is the book out of the whole list that I have thought about the most since, and I was already on the edge of giving it a 5, and I just can't give it any less. I think it is absolutely fantastic. So it is set in Baxter Beach, Barbados, and we're following a few different storylines, but I'm sorry, I'm going very fast because I've already talked about these books. We are following mostly Lala, who is a young woman stuck in a very abusive marriage, and a tragedy strikes, and it is heartbreaking, and the violence in this book is kind of what stopped me from giving it a 5 right away, just because it was so shocking, and it was a lot that it was really hard to read, but it really kind of talks about these cycles of male violence and these women who feel like they can't escape it, and they're really stuck, and kind of the highlight of this book is even just Baxter Beach, Barbados is so vivid and real. It kind of brings you to all these kind of minor characters as well, so you really feel like you know the whole community. It's harrowing. It's fantastic. Seriously, I think this is like one of the strongest books on the list. Please, please read it. It's a 5-star. It's fantastic. Nobody get mad at me. If you didn't watch that video, you might not know that I did not like this book. This is The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. So, okay, I shouldn't say that I didn't like it because I have no qualms. I'm not angry at this book at all. Of course, oh, you know what it's about. It is about twins, and one twin chooses to pass as a white woman and the other does not, and the twin who does not moves back to the town they grew up and raises her black daughter there, and the twin who's passing as white, they kind of separate. They no longer speak to one another for various reasons, and she raises her daughter, and you know, she keeps it a secret from her family and all the people in her new life that she's a black woman. So, people love this book, obviously. I am not telling you anything you don't know, and it's not even that I didn't like it. The whole book is dependent on the fact that this twin relationship has so altered all of the 4 women's lives, even if they don't know it. And we just didn't get like anything of the twins in their childhood or why their relationship is so strong. Like, just being twins is not enough for me to like sustain the whole crux of the book. And I think a lot of the moments that Brit Bennett gave us, it was really, the majority of the book was the twins' daughters and their different lives, and obviously the decisions their moms made really made their lives look very different, and that makes sense, but I just like needed way more of the twins to make it make sense for me, and I just like Passing by Nella Larson, I think, is way, way better, so I'm sorry. I just think like the character development wasn't there, and to win a huge prize and to like take over the world, we need a book that has good character development. So, I gave us a 3-star. I'm sorry. Okay. Next we have a really good one. That is Transcendent Kingdom by Gyasi. Love this book. This is about a family immigrating to the U.S. It is about addiction, mental illness, familial bonds, and love and heartbreak. So we follow Gifty, who is a STEM student, and we follow her and her family kind of pre and post this heartbreak that upended all of their lives, and that is the overdose of Gifty's brother. When he was very young, he overdosed on heroin, and that really altered everyone's life, and her kind of flung her mother into chronic depression, and she now has to care for her mother while also feeling this like distance between them, but also knowing that they'll always be connected to one another because of their shared love for Gifty's brother, and kind of their survival in the U.S. and as an immigrant family. It's just, I think, storytelling at its finest. I loved all of the themes that this book talked about. It was done with so much love, and I think a lot of times the way addiction is portrayed in literature is not always, what's the right word? It doesn't always feel compassionate, and I think this book explored all angles of it. I loved it. I think Gyasi is a fantastic storyteller. I cried at the end of this book, which seriously, guys, like I'm being serious, never happens. I just, 5 out of 5 star, loved it. I had a really, really great reading month. I hope you enjoyed this video. I've been rambling on for a very, very long time, so I am going to cut it here. But please let me know your thoughts if you've read any of these books, but also your favorite book of the month. Let me know. Let's chat about it. I have many books I'm excited about reading in July. Hopefully some big fat books. I'm doing big book summer. That is that's the goal. Yes, but thank you, seriously. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe if you feel so inclined, and I will see you very soon in my next video, which will be a vlog. So, bye everyone.